Mm.
It's good. Okay, we are live. At least that's what StreamYard says. Hello, everyone on the Speaker Insight page, inside the Connection Hub, and indeed in Changemaker Central. So we are going live in 3 different places. And I'd love for you to, so for those of you who don't know, we are Speaker Insight, where we help speakers, authors, and coaches to build a portfolio business on your terms. And, you know, we have this beautiful group. So inside, if you're watching this from the Facebook page, I will actually pop a little link in for you that allows you to join the Connection Hub, because that's actually where all the real stuff
Mm.
happens. And at the moment, we've been going through the highlights with a hashtag replay series. We've been going through the highlights of the trainings. We have about 200 trainings, free trainings that you can access at any time that really help speakers, authors, and coaches to build that business in the background. And every now and then this year, we are going to go actually live. So hello to the 4 of you who are watching. We are going to go live because there are some exceptional people who just stand out. Either we're going to be interviewing them, or we will certainly kind of give a little bit of room to a
Mm.
trend that might be happening. So, but the reason that we're doing the hashtag replay series is because there's so much good information in there, and the group grows on a regular basis because all of you are inviting other speakers, authors, and coaches,
Mm.
and the people who help them into the group. It's a very vibrant and wonderful space to be. One of the people who is actually in that group and very active in there is Simon Ong. And we invited him along. Kelly sends her apologies, but that means I get to interview Simon here from from Denmark, where I'm not supposed to be at the moment, but 3 storms have paid to BA flights in all sorts of ways. So I'm delighted to say that you can see the flags over there. I've been celebrating my niece's birthday over here, and we do that with flags, and there are many, many flags that actually kind of happen. So technology makes it all work, and we wanted to invite Simon along because you've got a book coming out. But a
Mm.
book coming out isn't the final article. We were talking about this just before we went live. There is a lot that goes into launching a book
Mm.
and even getting the deal that actually kind of does that. So we've got some questions available from people. And I'm just going to invite you to really share your experience of this, because for any of you, and I think this is a really good year, you know, we're on the back of 2 years that were
Mm.
hard going. 2020 and 2021 have been really hard and heavy for a lot of people. And I think a lot of us are actually going, right, 2022, this is the year, this is what I'm actually doing. And you are definitely leading the way in your approach to launching your book, which is happening on the 21st of April. But that's not really when it's happening, is it, Simon?
Indeed. Well, first of all, Helena, thank you so much for having me on this live. And I hope that what we share will be useful to those tuning in on the 3 different platforms. And
Indeed.
as you said, Helena, you know, the book isn't the only part of the process. There's a lot of other things that go into it. And when we look at it, a book isn't sort of like, I'm going to write it, I'm going to get it out, and it's done. It can span a couple of years, sometimes more.
Yeah.
And in my case, one of the positives from COVID, you mentioned 2020 and 21 just now. One of the positives from COVID, apart from becoming a father for the first time, was landing a book deal with Penguin. And I mentioned that for a particular reason, because when I get asked what some of my greatest challenges have been,
Mm,
looking at today, writing that book has been my greatest challenge. Not because writing a book is tough, but because I had to write a book while raising a newborn child in lockdown with no family around. And
for
that
sure.
made it even more of a challenge. And so I think that when we do commit to writing a book, it's like running a marathon. You don't just run the marathon next month. There's so many pieces to the puzzle that we have to address in order to be in the condition to run a marathon. And it's the same with writing a book. In order to write a book, you first have to see yourself as a writer. And
Yeah.
then when you get to the stage I'm at, a couple of months away from launch, you've then got to see yourself as your own PR machine. And so, like a business, you've got to wear so many different hats in the process of launching your book.
Yeah.
And for me, it's part of the journey. It's what also makes it enjoyable.
It really is. And you know, I love this, and we're gonna unpick so
Mm.
many of the things that you've already hinted at. But let me take it right back to the beginning, because you are a well-known entity. You do a lot of PR
Mm.
anyway, you know, sort of Huffington Post, you write for all sorts of people. So take it right back and tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be a coach, and just give people a sense of, you know, why you actually do what you do. I heard the newborn, but that's not it entirely, is it?
No, so as you can tell, I'm Chinese by background. I grew up to two Malaysian parents here in the UK, and when I was young, I mistakenly believed that success was defined by my job title: be a
Mm,
banker, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an accountant.
yeah.
And so my only goal in life was to be one of those jobs. And so I enrolled in the London School of Economics to study economics. And
Right.
then I graduated and started in the financial industry at what was probably the worst time possible in 2007. This
Okay.
was a year before the
Oops.
global financial crisis. And the first company that I started with was Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration just 14 months after I joined. And while at the time, Helena, it was one of the scariest experiences I went through because, as a young adult, you've got these big dreams. You want to work on developing your career, get that promotion, show your parents that they can be proud of you.
For sure.
All of that was swept away from under my feet in an instant. But looking back, it was a blessing in disguise because it kickstarted the journey to what I now get to do today.
For sure.
So what happened is I took some time out from the industry before I went back. So I was in and out of the financial industry for nearly 10 years. But
Mm,
I took that first experience of being out of the industry to really look inward. And so what I did is I started to ask myself questions such as, what did success mean to me?
yeah.
What did fulfillment look like? And what sort of impact did I want to have in the world?
Beautiful questions.
And I realized that the challenge on the back of that, once I had those answers, was
Mm,
designing my life around them.
great.
That was the challenge I had. And I explored different businesses because I realized that as long as I was working for someone, I would never have total freedom. My
For
future,
sure.
my promotion, my salary would be determined by people other than myself.
Yeah.
And so that got me interested in the entrepreneurial path.
Right.
Uh, However, what many people don't know when they look at the work that I do now is that I was involved in two businesses first
Hmm.
before I landed on the coaching. And
Okay.
those two businesses, one which was an MLM, the second which was in the food tech industry, did not work out. Uh,
Right.
but with those experiences, I took away a lot of lessons and insights about business and developing uh, an audience and a community for the work that you do. And so I was
Mm,
always curious about coaching from my time at university when I helped students land jobs in the city,
right.
but I never knew if it was possible for me to actually make a full-time career out of it.
For sure.
And so I remember my wife was looking through her Facebook at the time, and an advert came up for a 2-day workshop to introduce people to the idea of coaching and how
Right.
you could become a coach. I went along, and that was it, Helena. That was it. As soon as I
You found your
experienced
place.
and felt the power of coaching, I was like, actually, this could be something that I could explore.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years later, after I graduated and got the coaching certifications, I started to plunge myself down the rabbit hole and to explore just how far this could go. So I
Good for
started
you.
off coaching people one to one, and then that developed into speaking. I then had the opportunity to speak at some incredible organizations and communities. And then from there, now the writing, partnerships with brands, all of these new opportunities are now coming out as a result of layering on top of what I did previously.
And I think that's actually something that most of us
Mm,
don't necessarily appreciate, but start in exactly the same way. So it gives hope, I think, to a lot of
mm,
coaches and or speakers and or authors, because we lump you all together. Because actually,
mm,
if you're a speaker, you kind of do need to be doing some kind of consultancy or coaching. If you're an author, the same thing becomes true. Speaking actually is the thing that actually comes in there. So when we say we help speakers, authors, and coaches, it really is because those three, the blend of those three, is actually the thing that comes in. But as you say, you start in one of the spaces and you then kind of layer them on top. Now, here's the thing. You've built quite a big profile and you're regularly featured in like the news, in some of the big names of Forbes and, you know, sort of Huffington Post, etc. What's your secret to doing all of that? I'm sure a lot of people would really like to know what they might be able to do that you've done, because we can always model, right?
Definitely. Well, first of all, Helena, I'm going to take it back to basics
Go.
because when I say take it back to basics, I'm going to take it back to how I developed it from the very beginning. But the reason I say these are basics doesn't mean you should discard them when you reach a certain level, because I'm still using them now. You just use them in a different way as you elevate your profile and as you get sort of more experience. So the way I approach business is to think of it as two buckets. Most of us, when we start a business, we have a product or we have a service. So let's say coaching is your service. Now, what happens is that we spend all of our energy just focused on being the best coach and getting clients, and that's it. But that's not going to put you in a position in which you have a sustainable business for the long term. So what I did is I segmented my focus into two areas. The first area was being the best coach I could be. And that is as a result of getting mentors, getting coaches, reading books, signing up to online courses, getting trained myself to make sure I'm up to date and I'm not sort of falling behind, because we can fall behind if you haven't used what you learned years ago. And so that's one of the areas I spend a lot of time on, is to finesse my coaching, my speaking, and my writing, all these skills that I want to develop and be good at. The second half.
Out of interest, how long do you spend doing that now?
Sure. So I still spend time doing that. I think the skew has probably shifted a little less, because obviously as the profile increases, then there's a lot more demand on the PR side. So whereas before it was probably 50-50, which I think is important, it's probably now maybe 60-40 towards the business development side. And that's the second area. The second area for me is the business development side. Now, what happens for most of us is we love the coaching, we love the speaking, we love the writing, but we hate the business development side. We don't know how we sell ourselves or we build our business. And so for me, that second area, I made it fun so that I could fall in love with it. And so if you can fall in love with what you do and the business development side, I think that's when things start getting exciting. So the first thing I did is I knew that for me now, still underappreciated, the most underappreciated way to market your service as a coach is to speak. So I just started to speak for free at the beginning, Helena. It was like, if you're looking for a speaker, I'll speak for free. And my one of my first breaks, which helped me, is that I was coaching a client who was working for a well-known corporate. And she said to me, Simon, I would like to put you forward to speak at my company. They're doing some leadership seminars in the new year, and I would like to put you forward. Now, I knew that in the process, there would be other speakers who would put a proposal in, and they would have a fee associated with that. So in order for me to get an in, I decided to think a bit different. So what I did is I said to them, here's my proposal. Here's what I can talk about. Your fee is £0.
Fabulous.
In exchange for a testimonial and capture of content and video.
Fabulous.
And suddenly, I now became the most competitive offer on the table. And I said to them, if I don't perform, if I'm that bad, you haven't lost a single penny. If I'm good, however, you will look good. And so it was
a win-win.
Risky for them. It was win-win.
Yeah.
And from there, I was then able to use the content. I was able to use the testimonial to then go to the next event organizer and then ask for payment by saying, I spoke at one of your competitors about these topics. Would you be interested to have me come in to do something similar? So it was about
Mhm.
understanding, number one, how the process worked,
Great.
and second, thinking a bit different. So again, just to share with you examples, because I think we learn best when we hear how things have been put into action.
For sure.
So when I would go to events, and again, this is something I still do today. If
Yeah.
I signed up to go to an event to hear someone speak, what I would do is I would arrive early at that event and sit on the
Yeah.
front row. So I would get a front row seat.
Good for
Now,
you.
the reason I do that is, first of all, if you're early and you're on the front row, there's a greater chance you're going to meet the speaker
Yeah.
and the speaker's team. And that's important because what happens is after the event, the speaker who may not have been famous before is suddenly famous once the event's done. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody who's in that audience will want to go up to the front and speak to the person that just talked.
Yeah.
However, how many people think different and go to the people on the side who organize the event?
I,
So
I have to say, I am that person because I'm like, well, this is how you actually kind of build longer term relationships, right? Because who has
exactly.
access to the person that you want to have access to, right?
Totally, totally. And so I love getting to know the people that put the event together,
Great.
to thank them for what they did, to thank them for them bringing in the speaker, and also connecting with the speaker's team. And
Yeah,
that is how, and we can dive more into this later, Helena. That
for
is
sure.
how I managed to get Marie Forleo, one of the world's most well-known life coaches, wrote a New York Times bestseller, Everything is Figure Outable.
Yeah,
That is how I managed to get that endorsement,
great.
because by sitting at the front at one of her events in London, I
Yeah,
got connected to her hairstylist, a very
nice.
random connection,
Yeah,
but the guy was very cool and different. And I thought, I just want to speak to this guy to get to know him.
for
And
sure.
over the years, we developed a relationship on Instagram. And then when the time came, I was like, could you give Maria a little nudge and just see if she can give me an endorsement? And
Fabulous.
he wanted to help because we knew one another. We sort of connected and shared inspiration for years, and so
Yeah,
there was that trust, but also knowledge of one another that was built.
yeah,
And so it brings me back to one habit that I think we must focus on when I talk
great.
about the basics, and that
Yeah,
is every single week focus on expanding and nurturing your network. How
beautiful.
many new people are you meeting this week?
Yeah,
If you've got no new meetings in the diary, that tells you why your business isn't growing, because
fabulous.
people can only know about you when you start putting yourself out there, online and offline. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was regularly connecting with people through my network, through the online network, and
Hmm.
just saying it'd be great to have a conversation together to learn more about you. I
Yeah.
mean,
And you
one,
know, there's a great question that most people kind of ignore, and
mm,
that would be the, you know, whatever you've got going on for you, that question of, and we do inside the Connection Hub, you know, sort of hashtag, you know, call out is
yeah,
one of the best things. Who do you know that can help me with X or Y? That's
mm,
one of the best questions that you can put in there. Certainly, you know, sort of like by all means, seeing somebody interesting and just going,
mm.
hello, you sound really interesting. I'd really like a chat with you. That's a great thing. I've literally one of the metrics I run, certainly in the Speaker Insight business, but
Mm,
also in the other business that I run, is speak to 5 people a day. Like
mm,
reach out to 5 people a day. They could be people I know, they could be people that I don't know. Usually I kind of have at least 2 people that I don't know in there.
yeah,
And that now is also one of those things that you've just been talking about, which is when you show up, people see you, so they
mm,
start to reach out to you. So by the flip side, there's also the just be interesting, and
yeah,
people will actually also start to reach out to you in this way. And so
definitely.
today I've literally had that happen to me. It's like, can we just talk about this? I'm like, yes, we can. How about Friday? You know, but also having, and I think that the thing that you're talking about is, I think one of the things that we as speakers, authors, and coaches forget is to leave the buffer time in to
Mm,
actually be able to have those conversations, right?
definitely. And that goes back to that second area I was talking about is, are you making time for business development?
For
And
sure.
conversations and relationships are business development opportunities.
They
Now,
are.
one of the things that I do is when people talk about social media is bad, I think social media is great because it all depends how you use it. Social media is just a resource.
Yeah.
And so if you use it smartly, it can actually help you build powerful relationships. And,
Yeah.
and I'll share some practical examples of how I do it.
Sure.
So if you have connected with me on LinkedIn, there is a
Mm.
very high chance that you will receive a voice note from me, even
Yeah.
if it's just 7 or 8 seconds, welcoming you to my network and just saying hello. That is it. It's just a 7 or 8 second hello. And you will be surprised how rare that is for people to receive.
Yeah.
And I got a comment the other day saying, Simon, I love your energy. And I now know why you called your book Energize, because I just got your energy from your voice note. Let's catch up for a call at some point. I would love to hear what you're up to.
Brilliant.
And
Really
that
brilliant.
was simply from a voice note with no upsell,
Yeah.
no pushing, just simply, hello, I'm Simon. Welcome to my network. Great to connect with you. And I look forward to seeing some of your content. That is it.
Perfect.
And so what I'm doing here is I'm planting seeds. Every time the new connection request comes in, I put a voice note out. And
Fabulous.
as soon as the voice note is done, I archive the message.
Yeah.
So my inbox is clean. And if they respond, great, we've got a dialogue going.
Yeah.
So it just helps me to manage that.
That's
Uh,
good.
and when we think about networking, one of the things I'm noticing is people approach it very differently. And I think the typical approach we think about is, I'm going to reach out to this person because I want something from him or her. And it's sort of
Yes.
transaction. It's, I do this and then I'm going to get this. And I don't think that, I mean, that's great in the short term, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that is great for long-term relationship building. And
No.
so for me, two better approaches is one, um, coming in with value. Show that
Yeah.
you know what is important to them. And again, I'll give you an example. I was running an entrepreneur event, Helena, and I wanted Patrick Drake to speak. And Patrick
Right.
Drake is the co-founder of HelloFresh over here in the
Yeah.
UK, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company. And I wanted him to speak at an entrepreneur event I was running. Now,
Fabulous.
I don't have the budget to sort of bring someone of his status in to speak at the time I was running it. And so I looked on his Instagram and I saw that he was about to release a book. Talking about books, he was about to release the HelloFresh official recipe cookbook.
Yeah.
Um, Now, that gave me an insight. That told me that what is most important to him right now
Yeah.
is for his book to do well. And so he had a lot of messages coming in that he didn't respond to on his Instagram. So I simply went in with a voice message on his direct, on his DMs,
Yeah.
and said, Patrick, first of all, congratulations on the upcoming release of your new book. It must be a monumental moment. I'm actually running a entrepreneur gathering for an audience. And it would be amazing to have you come down to share your journey with the crowd. In exchange, I
Mm-hmm.
would love to bulk buy your book in a large quantity so everybody in the audience will have a copy. You get to
Fabulous.
sign those copies and we can take photos that you can then share on social media.
Love
Patrick
it.
responded within a few hours and said, let's get it in the diary.
Fabulous. And it is, it's that whole different approach that allows you to, and it's not a very different approach. You're just being
Mm,
human and you're just actually stopping and kind of making a different
mm,
interpretation, sort of. So there's a tool I use, which for those people who've watched us for a long time, the four
yeah.
intentions is definitely a way to step into somebody else's shoes and do that kind
Mm,
of thinking. Because I think until you have that as a natural habit, it's not necessarily easy, but it is something that you can learn. You can learn to think in
mm,
the way that you are talking about right now. But taking that, I'm just going to take it
mm,
into this because we're talking about how to launch a book, and right now we haven't
mm.
talked about any of that. So let me take it into that.
Definitely.
All of that visibility and all of those things that you've done to kind of raise your profile, etc., etc., the approaches that you make. How did all of that help you get your publishing deal with Penguin? Because you've mentioned Energize, and I'll pop the link
Mm,
into the book in a second because I'm sure people will want to get it. But talk
mm.
to us about how that happened and what can our speakers, authors, and coaches do to open doors in that way?
Sure. So first of all, there's sort of two parts from what you asked that I want to touch on, Helena. The first part
Sure.
is brand and profile.
Yeah.
Now, brand and profile is so important in today's world.
Mm.
Because when people come across your work, the first thing they are going to do is either they're going to Google you or they're going to jump on a social media platform like Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, type in
Sure.
your name and see what you're about. What
Yeah,
content are you putting out
completely.
there?
That's
So
just normal
if
and natural now. That's like breathing, isn't it?
exactly, it's a natural reaction to coming across your work. And imagine for a moment that you heard someone speak and you jumped onto social media or Google and nothing showed up about them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do? Naturally, you would stop following or asking more questions because there's just nothing
Yeah.
out there about them.
Yeah.
But imagine you went on Google or you went on social media and suddenly, boom, there's so many results. There's videos, there's courses, there's magazine articles, there's features, there's lots and lots of content for you to digest. What is happening is now your trust in this individual is deepening. So when people ask me, Simon, what is the ROI on a personal brand or profile? Because it's not like you put money into a share and your stock rises 20%, so you can measure your ROI as 20%. How do you
Yeah.
quantify the ROI for a brand and profile? And for me, I say, well, first of all, it is very difficult to quantify the ROI because it's a very different measurement. The best ROI is exactly the things we're talking about now, Helena. It is
Yeah.
a book deal, it is a speaking opportunity, it's a
Yeah.
brand partnership. Those are the ROI of a personal brand and profile, but they don't come straight away. They
Not at
don't come
all.
straight away. And so it's something that you have to trust in the process to do, to put in the work to develop that brand and that profile. Now, this
Yes.
leads nicely into how the book deal with Penguin happened, because combining what I said earlier about constantly expanding your network,
Mm.
building your profile, and nurturing your relationships. For me, once I had it in my head that I wanted to write a book,
Right.
guess who I wanted to start building relationships with? I wanted to start building relationships with other authors, with publishers, with editors, with
Yeah.
proofreaders, with
Yeah.
copywriters.
Yeah.
And so suddenly that part of my network started to expand.
Yeah.
And so as I started to have conversations with publishers, with editors, with people in the book industry, I
Mm.
started to think like an author. It
Yeah.
was, well, what are they looking for if I were to connect with them? What would make a good book proposal? When would
Yeah.
be the best time to send them the book proposal?
Yeah.
What would they be looking for if they were to pitch me to their internal committee?
Yeah.
And so once I started to think like an author, I then started to approach these people that I was building relationships with, and simply said, uh, I've learned a lot from what you've shared so far in the relationship we've built, and it got me thinking about writing a book. And I was wondering if you'll be open to having a coffee to hear some of the thoughts that I had. And so I
Yeah.
simply just went out there and started to have conversations. And then I sent emails out to some of the biggest publishers in the world. It's again another bold move. But then if you never ask, the answer is always no.
For sure.
And so I started sending emails out to Penguin, to HarperCollins, Simon and Schuster, Hay House, all the really well-known big publishers
Yeah.
in our space.
In our space. Yeah.
Yeah, and nothing, Helena. It was like crickets for months, which I would expect because they
For
must get
sure.
so many emails. Uh, but then this is where the brand kicked in,
Come
because
on.
in January 2020, I had the opportunity to be interviewed on Sky News.
Yes.
And then a few days later, I get an email saying, Simon, would you like to come to our offices for coffee? Now, I do not know what the nudge was, but I have a feeling
Mm-hmm.
that it was the appearance on Sky News that would have helped
Sure.
in that conversation.
For sure.
Because when I went to the office to meet the team, one of the comments was, "Great interview, by the way, Simon on Sky News."
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me was a strong indication on
Yeah.
how important it is to build your brand and profile.
And what's interesting about that is that if you have a sense of what the brand and the profile is, you accordingly show up in the spaces where you would like to
Mm.
be interviewed, exactly as you've been
Yeah.
saying. but you also cultivate places, there's a yes list and a no list. Here's my wish list of the best places and the best people whose podcasts I want to be on, who I want to be interviewed on, and everything else. Having just that is a really great thing, but also having a know what doesn't fit my brand so that you know what to say no to really also helps, because exactly as you say, it's a cumulative effect of building the profile that you've actually got. So wherever you show up and however you show up, so willing and helpful and adding value in all of the things that we've been talking about already, those are all things that you can't know. What was it somebody said to me? And this goes for all the coaching that somebody might also have. You as a coach are probably not the person. This is a way of humbling coaches. I think sometimes we need to just kind of manage people's expectations. You can't know if you were the person that actually turned the lock. What you can do is you can be one of the people along the way that actively just even provided a key. But somebody else might be the person that actually allowed the person to make the motion of turning the lock in that key. So it's that cumulative effect of, you don't know which one of the things it was, whether it was even finding the right door, whether it was, sort of getting the key, whether it was, sharpening it, whatever it was. But something somewhere in all of that effort was the thing that then actually happens. So again, it comes back to this whole, it looks like it's one thing, but it's actually 1,000 small things, right?
Definitely. And what I would do, I'm not sure if I've done it already, but I'll share an article I wrote recently about an example of a cumulative effect. If we go back to the book Energize, and one of the endorsements I was blown away by getting was by Simon
This is
Sinek.
the one I really want to.
Yeah.
I totally
And
like. Please tell everybody, because the Marie Forleo one was really great. So tell us how it came about, and tell us how you're using it and whether you had an intention. So because I want to know more.
Definitely. So in terms of the cumulative effect,
Hang on, wait. I'm going to take you right back. So for all of you, having an endorsement on your book is obviously an important thing. So in your case, did you know who you wanted, or did you have a little hit list of the endorsements that you might like? Can you start there? Like, let's go right back, right?
Perfect. So in terms of the endorsements, I only started because my publisher and I, obviously the focus at the beginning was just get the book written. Let's get it out to the point where we are in the proof stage, where it's just sort of grammar and small sort of issues we're looking at. And so it was only in November, December last year, so only a few months ago now, that we started to put together a list of people we would love to have endorse the book. And as you may know, Helena, when you sit down to put a list together, typically there are sort of three categories. So the first category is the easy one. It's people you already know in your network that would be great to have on the cover of the book. The second category is people who are a bit ahead of you, but would be still great to have in a book, but you don't really know them. But they're still ahead of you, so they still have a potential of saying yes. And then the third category is what we would call the blue sky thinking. The sort of wow moment people that if you were to get on your cover, would just elevate the sort of book's recognition. So in that wow category, we had the likes of some well-known New York Times best-selling authors like Marie Forleo, Simon Sinek, Keith Ferrazzi, and a few other names. And for me, the sort of first big name I got, which was in sort of the second category, was a woman, Dorie Clark. And,
okay, great.
Yeah, I don't know if you come across her work, but she's a top 50 thinker in the world. She's a LinkedIn influencer. She does a lot of courses on LinkedIn. She writes a lot for Harvard Business Review, and she's had multiple best-selling books in the US. So for me, that being a second category, because I've spoken with her before, so it was a bit of a stretch, but it wasn't a big of a stretch into the first category. So that for me alone, once I got Dorie Clark, I was like, that is amazing. And now I've got my first sort of fairly big, well-known name on there. And then in January, when I got an email saying Simon Sinek has read it and he wants to endorse it, see his blurb below. I was blown away. But I guess I wasn't blown away. I was blown away for two reasons. One,
Mm,
because it's Simon Sinek, and he's been a huge inspiration on my journey.
for
But
sure.
second, because I got a message from my publisher saying that it's rare for him to actually endorse many books. If you
Mm,
look at a lot of books in personal development and leadership, it's very difficult to see a book in which he's endorsed one,
for sure.
and especially from the UK.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was even bigger of a deal. The
Yeah.
fact that he decided to spend time to write an endorsement, given
Hmm.
how busy his schedule is
For sure.
for the book, and that's how it kind of came together. But if I were to look at the cumulative effect, and this is to tell people who want to get endorsements from some big names, that it doesn't happen just like that. You don't just go send an email and you get the endorsement.
No.
That cumulative journey started back in 2013, 2014, when I went to a launch event hosted by a company called Table Crowd.
Right.
Uh, in London at I think it's the 8 Club in Moorgate.
Okay.
And he was hosting a book launch event for his second book called Leaders Eat Last.
Yeah.
And I went along to the event. There was some drinks. There was a dinner. He was doing a dinner talk at the time. And the way I worked myself into a conversation with him, and it was only like a 10 or 15-minute conversation before he sat down and then gave a dinner speech, is
Mm.
I looked through the registration list of all the people attending that night. And there was about maybe 60 or 70 people in total.
Yeah.
And I saw, luckily, that him and I were the only Simons on that register. And so I thought to myself, that is my icebreaker
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
So I just went up to him and said, hey, Simon, looks like we're the only two Simons on the list tonight. And used that as a way to connect.
Great.
And after the event, he was signing all the copies of the book. So I got 3 copies of the book, one for myself, one for my wife, and one for a client.
Yeah.
And I got him to sign each one, and we took a photo together.
Nice.
Back then, it's a very grainy photo because it's one of the old phones. We took a photo together, and I just said to him afterwards, I said, Simon, one day I will speak on the stage next to you.
Beautiful.
Um, and fast forward to 2019,
Uh-huh.
I was invited to speak at the WBEX, which is
Yeah.
otherwise known as the World Business and Executive Coaching Summit.
Yeah. Great.
And alongside me in the lineup was the likes of Daniel Goleman, Daniel Pink,
Fabulous.
Greg McCune, and Simon Sinek. So that was, again, the cumulative effect of crossing paths. But
Mm.
again, not really spending time to know each other at any length. Again, we just
Right.
happened to be speaking at the same event. And then I got speaking with his events team during COVID.
Right.
Because, as you know, anybody who was or is a speaker needed to adapt when COVID struck, because all
For
in-person
sure.
events were cancelled.
For sure.
And that was the same for Simon and his team, because he couldn't travel around America and do his talks anymore because, well, everybody shut up shop.
Yeah.
So they had to pivot onto the online space. And
Mm-hmm.
so he and his team went about creating classes. And
Great.
so I got connected to one of his team. Nothing has happened yet with regards to the class.
Yeah.
But then towards the end of last year, we had a catch-up call with one of his team. And I used that as an opportunity just to slide in there into the conversation. I said, Greg, would you be open to just checking in with Simon to see if he could provide an endorsement for my book?
Fabulous.
And to manage expectation, he just said, I would try, but just to manage your expectation, it rarely happens. We get a lot of requests, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. So it's really going to be up to him. But just to manage expectation, I'll do my best. But, it's likely to be a no. And so I just said, well, if there's anything you need, let me know. But I'm sure it can't hurt.
Yeah.
And so he asked, and literally 3 days later, Helena, I get a message coming back, and I sort of said, wow, I've got to open that email and check it out, expecting a no,
Yeah.
because that was built into my expectation from what he said. And it
Sure.
was, Simon, we're still working on the online class and deciding how we're going to do that. So I thought, okay,
Yeah.
that's still not happening.
Yeah.
However, and I was like, oh, my interest is
Come
piqued.
on now.
However, Simon has got back immediately with a blurb. And then he shared the paragraph at the bottom. And
Yeah.
that just made me, Helena, feel like a kid on Christmas morning.
It really, really was. And it was so great for you to share it in the Connection Hub as well, to just kind of go, Oh my God,
Mm.
and what I love is that you've shared the story of how you've actually kind of done that,
Mm.
and really the power of a relationships. You know, if Kelly were here, she'd be
Mm.
nodding furiously as well. Because for us, the reason we set up the connection hub to be the connection hub is
Mm.
because it really does happen via relationship. It really does happen via the human connection that we have to one another. The simplicity of, and by the way, I really
Mm.
hope everyone's like listening to all the nuggets that you're pulling out here. Just even something like, there's a person who I have my sights on.
Mm.
And to be able to think about, okay, what would be the right approach to this? So many people think that we just have to show up and think in the moment, but
Mm.
actually pre-planning how you might approach something or someone,
Mm.
or doing that whole rehearsal before you do something, is one of the most vital things. You know, we as coaches, I think, tell our coachees and our clients this all of the
Mm.
time, and yet how many of us really are an example of doing that? I think you are, and I really
Definitely.
love that.
And I think there's one thing I want to extract out of here, because I think it's important, and many people need to hear this, in the sense that most of us are lazy when it comes to building relationships.
For
So what
sure.
happens is that, if I sort of go back to the example of reaching out to publishers, most of us, and I know this from personal experience, talking to a few friends, what
Mm.
we do is we write one email and we send that same email to
Yeah.
25 companies.
Nope. Can't
Guaranteed
do
that's
it.
going to go straight into spam.
Yeah.
So what I mean here is that you want to do things that most people won't do. So
Yeah.
if I use Penguin as an example, I didn't just reach out and say, can we have a chat about writing a book? Because I already know that's what 99% of people would do.
Yeah.
Instead, I just shared a little bit about why I'm choosing to email them, which is very different to just emailing someone.
Yeah.
So I simply said, I've been inspired by some of your authors, the likes of Seth Godin, Simon Sinek, Marie Forleo, all of whom you have published.
Yeah.
And recently, I had the opportunity to attend Marie's launch, which you put together so well, by the way.
Yeah.
And I can imagine how hard an effort it was to manage her
Um,
schedule, given she was only in London for a week.
yeah.
I had a conversation with Marie after the event and her team, and just hearing about her book journey, she said to me, Simon, if you're thinking about writing a book, you should have a chat with Penguin, because they have been fantastic in working with me on my book. And so that leads me to this email to write to
Right.
you. And so what's happened is that, rather than just emailing the same vague email to everyone,
For
you're
sure.
making it very personal,
Yeah.
and you're actually making it meaningful when people read it. And so again,
Really
I would
love
do
it.
the same thing with Hay House. When I approach
Yeah.
Hay House, I would talk about the book by Vex King,
Yeah.
and how his work has influenced me because I followed him on Instagram, and
Yeah.
also Andrea McLean, and the work that she does with This Girl Is on Fire. And if I go to
Mm.
HarperCollins, it will be again something very specific. And
Yeah.
so you want to do the work now,
Yeah.
because it's going to
Yeah.
save you a lot of time later.
and
If you,
and it is, you know, sort of, I love that you that you called it lazy. It's lazy, and or just the foresight to actually
Mm,
kind of, again, step into the shoes of the person that's receiving that email, because 9 times out of 10 that's not the person that's going to make things happen, but they're still a
yeah,
gatekeeper. They're still a person who you need to kind of go, hang on a minute, I'm acknowledging everything that you
mm,
do, and I'm really I'm applauding the
yeah,
contribution that you've been in some way. And that actually makes such a difference, because who doesn't like a little bit of praise, even if it's not, even if the smile that somebody once said, you know, I watch you. So this was when I was
yeah.
working in an environment. Um, and they said, you seem to be smiling at your screen the whole time. Like, how, what is that? And I was like, well, every time I write an email, I'm having a conversation with a person.
Mm,
And so smiling at the conversation that you are unfolding as you type the words
mm,
in is one of the best ways to know that you are likely to elicit a smile at
mm,
the other end when they open it. You know, we
mm,
live in a world where screens are really the thing. I think, you know,
totally.
the one thing that's come out of the pandemic is that we're kind of getting much more used to seeing each other on
Mm,
screens. You know, so I
yeah.
used to work in the video conferencing world way back, when FaceTime was not a thing and Skype was slightly unheard of, sort of. So that
Mm.
was a real kind of getting people used to how that works. So these days, I think we're more used to smiling at each other in that way.
Mm.
But even in an email, if you actually do it with a smile, that
Mm.
contribution does definitely come through. And it's that
Mm.
acknowledgement that you're talking about that
Definitely.
can actually say, I put the hours in, I've done the experience pieces. Now here's me sharing that experience. Because what
Mm.
I really love about what you're saying is you're also utilizing, even in this interview, you've probably,
Mm.
I don't know what, done 10 examples of things that you've actually done. So
Mm.
using everything as a documented or a
Mm.
spoken kind of reference to this is how it works. All
Mm.
of those things are really good things that people can do to kind of plan the launching of the book that you're actually coming into, right?
Exactly. And I think just again tied to that is too many of us
Yeah.
we give up too soon.
Yeah.
We give up too soon, and before we've actually thought about how we are going to do it. So, for example, we go on Instagram or whatever platform you're following someone on, and you try and put a comment or you send them a message, and you hear
Yeah.
nothing, and then you give up trying to build a relationship with someone
Yeah.
without kind of challenging yourself. Well, how could I get into their inbox?
Yeah.
Now, for me, I'll try a couple of ways and then I'll move on, and then I'll do a couple of ways, I'll move on. But I wouldn't just stop at one.
Yeah.
And here is why. If you go onto an influencer's page on Instagram and they have, I don't know, 25,000 likes,
Yeah.
500 comments, guaranteed whatever you type in there is going to go into a vacuum.
For sure.
It is going to get diluted by all the other comments. So
Yeah.
you've got to think smarter. So when I reached out or connected with someone who's fairly influential, what I did is there's a phrase I use, and it's called "find where they are not loved and then give them love." So
Beautiful.
if someone is on Instagram who's got a huge following, and then you go to their profile on LinkedIn, and then their
Uh-huh.
post has got 4 likes, 7 comments,
Got it.
that's where they need the love. And so
Great.
that's when you can start coming up on their radar. You can add a
Beautiful.
valuable comment. You can reach out to them. You can inquire about the work they're doing on a platform where they're not getting
Where
much
they're
love,
not. Yeah. Yeah.
because then you are going to be visible. And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm seeing, is that sometimes when people follow someone, they give up too soon
Yeah.
without getting a bit clever and thinking, well, how can I get onto their feed or onto their radar in a very different
Brilliant.
way, in a very clever way. And so that's why I challenge people to ask yourself, if the first thing didn't work, how could you do it differently?
Yeah,
How
for
could you
sure.
do it differently?
I really, really love that, and it's interesting because again, that's why Kelly and I set up Changemaker
Mm.
Central. It's all about the foundations. Sort of building a speaker or the coach business is still all about the
Mm.
foundations and putting those in place. And so we encourage people to do a lot of the things that you've been talking about. And it is still all around when you've built the relationships, you
Mm.
can actually quote cash in on those, but it isn't about cashing in on them. It's
No.
actually about going, how do I share? Because people genuinely see the heart that you have and the place that you're coming from. So I've just actually, and I'm just going to pop it inside the Connection Hub as well, I've put a copy of Energize in there. In the last sort of moment that we've kind of got, I've got connections. If you want to connect to
Mm.
Simon, he's obviously a very personable person and will be happy to speak to you, which we know from inside the Connection Hub anyway. But I've put the copy of your book in there. Give us a 60-second summary. What can people expect from this?
Sure. So, what you can expect in the book is an understanding of how, when you begin transforming your energy from a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual perspective,
Yeah.
you begin to transform the way you live and work forever. And
Mm-hmm.
here is why: because many of us know we have to have a vision of what we want in life in order to have something to work towards. And then, if you work backwards, you then write down the plan. And then
Yeah.
from the plan, you have to execute on the actions to make the plan work.
Yeah.
But if you simply don't have the energy to execute on those actions,
For sure.
that dream, that vision, that plan will remain a
Yeah.
distant goal that will never be achieved. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's understanding how do we put this foundation of energy together. So when we show up each day, we are energized by possibilities, not limitations. We're energized by what could be rather than what can't. And we're
Yeah.
energized by the fact that we are slowly but surely ripping open that portal to our hero potential. And
Wonderful.
tying it back to how to launch a book, if you are in a process of launching your book, look inside of you and understand what are the things that I'm interested in and how can I overlap that with the launch. So I'll give you an example on how I'm doing so. When I grew up, I used to love film, whether it's Hollywood films, Asian film, European cinema. And one of the things I love about film is the way they build up excitement before the film is released. So
Mm.
let's say you've got a film coming out later this year. What you would tend to see in television, on YouTube, on social media is trailer number 1, trailer number 2, trailer number 3, building up the excitement.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned from that, because that's an interest of mine, is to take some of that
Yeah.
and overlay it into the book launch. So
Beautiful.
how can I create a book launch in which there is excitement that builds up right to the day? So
Great.
you will have seen some of the things I've shared already. So the endorsements were
Yeah.
sort of, if you call, phase 1.
Yeah.
Phase 2 is then sort of, you would have noticed yesterday, my cover photos and all my social media changing. So
For
now we're
sure.
starting to get everywhere on the social.
Great.
Third would then be the trailers. So if you keep an eye out for the next few weeks, I'm going to be working to put together some book trailers in the style of a film trailer
Fabulous.
that builds up to the release. So instead of coming soon to your local cinema, this will be coming soon to your local bookstore.
Fabulous.
And so we build that up, and in the background, then sort of writing for magazines. I've got an article out next week, as an example, in which I'm featured in Planet Mindful
Nice.
and a few other sort of magazines building up to launch. And so all of this will come together
Yeah.
from different channels. So we will
Yeah.
have video, text, audio being Clubhouse,
Mm.
LinkedIn audio.
Yeah.
We then have interviews in press. We then have potentially radio and television. So
Yeah.
as it gets closer to the launch day, all of these channels start to pop all
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
in sort of an explosion for the big day. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the way I'm seeing it. I'm
Love it.
mapping it out as if I would be if I was a director for film. And so
Love it.
that's what I'm drawing from. And what I'm trying to say here is tap into the things that make you you. And how
Yeah.
can you draw on those interests and passions and embed that into your launch process?
Really love that. I absolutely love it. And of course you've tied in really, really nicely. So I don't know whether you know, but I run vision
Mm,
board workshops. They're so much more than a vision board workshop. They tap into exactly what you're talking about. And I've got one coming up on Saturday. So
mm,
so it literally is just one of those. That's
mm,
exactly what it's about. It's about kind of visualizing the full success of something and how
mm,
you can bring all of you into how that actually works. So that visualization and
mm,
then the breaking it down into
mm,
what do I know about? What am I passionate about? And then going, and how can that support and help me? That's that extra step that somebody sort of takes. So
mm.
for those of you, so I've put all of Simon's links into, I am actually going to pop the vision board workshop in here as well, just because you can
Definitely.
literally do that
And
for the book launches or the
mm.
writing of things that you've actually got in here as well.
And
But
one thing on the vision board, I don't know if you come across the concept, but I'd love to share because I'm sure
go for it.
your audience will also benefit, Helena. Have you heard of the concept called real life vision board?
Absolutely.
So for me, I love utilizing that concept of a real life vision board because
Yeah.
that's where I get the most energy. So I
Yeah.
say to people, if on your vision board is you driving a Tesla,
Yeah.
go and book out a test drive in a Tesla. So
For sure.
expose your senses to a sample of
Yeah.
that vision being real right now.
That's it. That's exactly it. And it, you know, sort of like for a lot of people, that starts with something as simple as I want
Mm,
to write my book. Okay, great. Go and get the cover designed now.
yeah.
It may not be the final cover, but actually, if you've got the cover sitting there and then
Mm,
stick it on the front of a journal
mm,
or something along those lines so that it just sits there every day when you're writing, that gets you so much closer mentally,
mm,
exactly as you say, on a mental, physical, emotional, spiritual basis. You've
mm.
actually got it there in front of you, and that makes a massive difference. So on that note, we could chat for ages and ages, but we're going to let everybody kind of, relax and kind of embed every single scrap of goodness that you've shared. And just thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to read the book.
Well, Helena, again, thank you so much for having me on this live. And just to echo what Helena just said, if you have any comments for me, any questions on the back of what we have discussed, do
Sure.
drop them in the comments below, especially if you're watching this on replay.
Yeah.
And we will be going through them, and I will look to respond to as many as I can.
It's a brilliant thing to do. And for any of you who might feel a little bit stuck, do kind of take up our offer of book an unstuck call. You've just heard how important connections are. It really is a vital thing. So Simon, thank you so much and good luck with everything. Obviously we'll be hearing about it as we go through.
Thank you so much.
Take care.